It was an ordinary evening when Jake found himself walking through the woods behind his house. The sun had just started to set, casting a warm golden glow over the trees. The air smelled fresh, and the rustling of leaves created a peaceful background sound. Jake was used to taking evening walks. It was his time to relax and clear his mind after a busy day. But that evening, something was different. As Jake walked deeper into the forest, a strange feeling washed over him. It wasn't the usual calm he felt. Something was out of place. He paused, looking around. The usual sounds of birds and insects had disappeared. In the stillness, he heard a faint sound, almost like a soft sobbing. Curiosity got the better of him, and he followed the noise. It led him to a small clearing where, to his shock, he saw her. A young woman, lying on the ground, her clothes torn and dirty. Her hair was long and tangled, and her skin had a pale glow to it. She looked injured, her face twisted in pain. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had never seen anyone like her before. Her eyes were wide and strange, almost glowing in the dim light. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, stepping closer. His voice was soft, cautious. The woman looked up at him with confusion and fear. For a moment, she didn't say anything. It was as if she couldn't believe he was standing there. Then, slowly, she whispered, "Please, help me." Jake's instincts kicked in. Without thinking, he crouched down beside her. "Don't worry, I'm here to help." She flinched when he reached out, but Jake didn't stop. He gently lifted her into a sitting position and checked for injuries. Her arm was badly bruised, and her leg appeared to be twisted at an odd angle. "Stay with me," Jake said, trying to keep her calm. "I'll get you help." But as soon as he touched her arm, she gasped in pain. "No, don't," she said, her voice shaky. "I can't go. They're looking for me." Jake furrowed his brow. "Who's looking for you? What happened?" The woman's eyes flickered around nervously. "I'm not from here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to end up on your planet." Jake felt a shiver down his spine. Her words didn't make sense, but the fear in her eyes was real. She wasn't from here. Where was she from? And why was she so terrified? His mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. He didn't know this woman, but there was something about her that made him want to protect her. He couldn't just leave her there. "Don't worry," Jake said again, more firmly this time. "I won't let anything happen to you. You're safe now." But deep down, Jake felt a sinking feeling. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. In the days that followed, Mark couldn't stop thinking about the alien woman he had found hiding in his chalet. He had seen so many strange things in his life, but never had he encountered something like this. The creature was not like the beings he had seen on the news or in movies. She was real, and her fear seemed genuine. He hadn't been sure what to do. Should he contact the authorities? Should he turn her in? But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that something wasn't right. She wasn't a threat. She was scared. He couldn't just turn his back on her. So, Mark decided to wait. He didn't want to be hasty. The idea of living in the same space as an alien was both thrilling and terrifying. It was clear she was not human, but the more he observed, the more he saw that she was just like him. Mark watched her from a distance over the next few days, trying not to invade her space. She was small and had an otherworldly glow about her. Her skin was a smooth shade of blue, and her eyes, when they met his, were full of mystery. But despite her alien nature, there was something warm and kind in her gaze. She wasn't aggressive. She wasn't here to hurt him. She was hiding, just like anyone else might if they were in danger. One afternoon, Mark sat in the living room, sipping on his coffee, trying to figure out what to do next. As he glanced at the corner of the room where the woman had taken shelter, he saw her peeking out from behind the furniture. She must have noticed him staring because her expression froze, and she quickly retreated. But not before their eyes met again. Something inside him stirred. It was like a pull, a connection that couldn't be ignored. Without thinking, Mark stood up and walked toward the corner. His heart pounded in his chest, unsure of what to say or do. But when he reached the spot, the woman was gone. Only a small glowing object was left behind, pulsating gently. Mark stared at it for a moment, wondering if she had left him some kind of message. But then, as he bent down to examine it, he heard a voice from behind him. "Please don't be afraid." Mark turned, his heart racing. Standing behind him was the alien woman, looking more vulnerable than ever. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of hope and fear. He couldn't believe it. She had spoken. "I won't hurt you," Mark said, his voice soft. He had no idea what was going on, but in that moment, he knew one thing. He had to help her. As the human and the alien girl continued to walk through the forest, an eerie silence surrounded them. The trees loomed tall above them, their branches swaying gently in the wind. The girl, though seeming fragile, moved with a quiet confidence that caught the human's attention. He couldn't help but notice how she scanned the surroundings with a mix of curiosity and wariness, as if she knew something he didn't. The human, still unsure of who she was or why she had appeared, glanced at her again. He wanted to ask her more questions, about her origins, about the planet she came from, about everything. But something held him back. He didn't want to seem too intrusive. Breaking the silence, the alien girl finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. "I know you have many questions," she said, "but not all of them can be answered. Some things are better left unknown for now." The human stopped in his tracks. What did she mean by that? Her eyes met his, and there was something unspoken in them. She seemed to be hiding something, but what? The girl continued, her tone shifting slightly. "I understand if you're confused, but there's something important I need from you." The human raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. What could she possibly want from him? He had no special skills or knowledge that could help her, he thought. She took a deep breath and then spoke again, her words slow but deliberate. "I need your help to find a safe place, a place where no one will follow us." The human felt a pang of worry rise within him. Safe. Follow. Who was after her, and why? "Why me?" he asked, his voice unsure but filled with curiosity. "Why not someone else?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a few steps forward, looking around the forest as if checking for any signs of danger. "Because you are different," she said after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "You care." The human was stunned by her words. Care. He had never really thought of himself as someone who stood out or made a difference in the world. But hearing her say that made him feel like he was part of something bigger than himself. "I don't know what you mean," he said quietly, still trying to process everything. "But I'll help you, however I can." The girl looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said, a small smile forming on her lips. "You don't know how much this means to me." Though her smile was small, it carried a sense of relief that made the human feel like he had made the right choice. There was so much more to this situation than he understood. But for now, he would stay by her side and help her however he could. As they continued their walk, the air seemed to grow heavier with mystery. What had he just gotten himself into? And who, or what, was she really? As the days passed, things between Liam and the alien girl, who he had come to know as Aria, grew more complicated. Aria had kept her distance at first, wary of Liam's curiosity. But after her injuries began to heal, her demeanor changed. She became more open, allowing him to ask her questions, even though she was still reluctant to reveal everything about her life. Liam couldn't help but wonder why she was here, on Earth, far from whatever home she had once known. She wasn't like the others he had heard of, the aliens who came in search of resources or power. No, Aria was different. She didn't carry the air of hostility or fear that others might have. Instead, she seemed lost, as if she had been running from something far more dangerous than any human could imagine. One evening, As Liam was making his way back to his small cabin, he found Arya standing by the edge of the forest, looking up at the sky. The setting sun bathed her in an orange glow, making her look almost ethereal, as if she belonged to the heavens. "You don't belong here, do you?" Liam asked quietly, his voice filled with curiosity. Arya turned to face him, her violet eyes meeting his with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "No," she answered simply, "but I have nowhere else to go." Her voice was soft, but heavy with sadness. There was a weight to her words that Liam couldn't ignore. He stepped closer, feeling an urge to comfort her, though he didn't know how. "You could stay with me," Liam offered without thinking. "You don't have to be alone." Arya's eyes widened, as though she hadn't expected him to say such a thing. "Why?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Why would you help me? I'm not like you. I'm not even from this world." Liam paused, trying to find the right words. He had always been someone who cared about others, no matter where they came from. Because no one deserves to be alone, no matter where they come from. We all need help sometimes. A long silence passed between them, and for the first time, Arya didn't pull away. She simply stood there, considering his words. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you, Liam," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet gratitude. The two of them stood together in the fading light, the unspoken bond between them growing stronger. Arya had been running for so long, carrying the burden of her past, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Liam didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. He had just made an ally in the most unexpected way. And as strange as it seemed, he was ready to help her in any way he could. The alien woman stood still, staring at the human who had saved her. His name was John, and she still couldn't fully understand why he had chosen to help her, even after everything that had happened. In her world, aliens and humans weren't exactly friends. They were different, and sometimes those differences led to conflict. But here, in this small, quiet place on Earth, John had shown nothing but kindness. She couldn't stop thinking about how he had risked his life for her, a stranger from another world. In all her years, no one had ever done something so selfless. Her people valued strength, power, and survival above all else. But John valued something else entirely. He valued life. "Why did you help me?" the alien woman finally asked, her voice soft and uncertain. John looked at her with a calm, steady gaze. He had never once shown fear, not when the danger had been clear, and not now. He had seen her, lying hurt and broken, and without a second thought, he'd moved to help. Maybe it was because he had been raised to do what was right, or maybe it was something deeper, something instinctual. "I couldn't just leave you," John said simply. "I don't know why, but I felt like I had to help. No one should be left to suffer alone." The alien woman blinked, surprised by the simplicity of his words. To her, that sounded almost too easy, but she also realized that it was the truth. There was no hidden agenda in his eyes, no need for something in return. He wasn't asking for anything. That was rare. In her world, every action had a price. She felt a strange warmth inside her chest, something she hadn't experienced in a long time. It wasn't the kind of warmth that came from food or shelter, but something deeper, more comforting. She wondered if humans felt like this all the time, this strange feeling of connection and care. John noticed her silence and took a step closer, but not too close. He respected her space, understanding that she might need time to process everything. She was different from humans, and he didn't want to push her into anything she wasn't ready for. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. For a moment, the alien woman didn't know how to respond. She had never been asked that before. Her people didn't ask such questions. They didn't show vulnerability. But here with John, she felt something shift inside her. She nodded slowly. I think I will be." John smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was warm, genuine. The alien woman hadn't realized until now how much she had longed for something like this. They stood there in silence for a while, neither one knowing exactly what to say next. But for the first time in a long time, the alien woman didn't feel alone. With John by her side, things felt a little less complicated. As the days went by, things became more complicated. The human, standing in the middle of a room filled with tense silence, couldn't help but think about the alien woman who had now become an integral part of his life. She had come into his life unexpectedly, and in such a short time, everything seemed to have changed. He thought back to when he first found her, weak, scared, and hidden away. Her eyes had been filled with fear and trust all at once, a mixture that he had never seen in another creature before. Now, standing here, those same eyes looked at him, but there was something different. She was no longer the fragile, lost alien he had first helped. She was strong, capable, yet still vulnerable in her own way. They had shared many quiet moments. It wasn't just the language barrier that kept them apart. There was something deeper, something unspoken. The human could feel it. Every time she looked at him, every time they exchanged a glance, there was something between them, an invisible thread pulling them closer. But there was also an undeniable truth. She had a secret, something about her past, her mission, her purpose. It was all hidden behind those intense eyes. He had tried to ask her, but she was skilled in deflecting the question, always changing the subject or offering him some vague explanation that left him with more questions than answers. The longer they stayed together, the more the human realized that he had started caring for her. Not just because she needed help, but because there was a connection between them, one that he couldn't ignore. But then, one evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, she asked him a question that made his heart race. "Do you ever regret helping me?" She asked quietly, her voice almost a whisper. He was taken aback. The question was simple, but the weight of it felt like 1,000 pounds. Regret. He had never once thought of regretting anything. Yes, things had become complicated, and there were risks involved. But could he regret offering help to someone who needed it, someone who had become more than just an alien in his life? "No," he answered, his voice firm, though there was a slight hesitation in his words. "I don't regret helping you. I don't regret anything that brought us here." The alien woman seemed to soften at his response, her eyes reflecting the glow of the fading sunlight. For the first time in weeks, she looked at peace, as if his words had put a part of her at ease. "I don't know what my future holds," she admitted, a trace of sadness in her voice. "But right now, in this moment, I'm grateful to you. I think I've found something I never expected." He didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, unable to form the right words. What could he say? He was starting to feel the same way. As they stood there, the weight of her words hung in the air. There was a choice to be made, by both of them. Would they continue down this path, together, or would they part ways? The decision was no longer in the hands of just one person. It was something they would have to figure out together. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of the morning sun, streaming through the cracks in the curtains. His heart raced as he looked at her. She had been quiet for a while now, her eyes lost in thought. He wasn't sure what had changed, but something felt different. For days, she had been the mysterious, strong alien woman who had surprised him at every turn. But now, in this quiet moment, she seemed vulnerable, almost human. He had saved her life, helped her escape, but there was still so much he didn't understand about her. "I don't want to be a burden to you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words took him by surprise. He had never thought of her as a burden. In fact, he had come to admire her strength and the courage she had shown in the face of danger. But hearing her say this made him realize how much she had been holding back. "You're not a burden," he said, walking over to her. He wanted to reassure her, but there was a part of him that feared she might leave once she realized how much he cared. She had been so distant at times, and he wasn't sure if that was because she was afraid of getting too close, or if she simply didn't want to be saved. Her gaze lifted to meet his, her eyes soft yet filled with something he couldn't quite place. "But I don't belong here. I don't belong with you." Her words cut deep, but he didn't let it show. "Maybe we don't have to belong anywhere. Maybe we just have to be here, right now, in this moment." She looked at him as if searching for the truth in his words. After a long silence, she finally nodded, though there was still hesitation in her expression. "What if I told you I'm not going anywhere?" he asked, his voice firm with conviction. "What if I told you that you don't have to face all of this alone?" She blinked, taken aback by the certainty in his voice. "You would stay?" He smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Yes, I'd stay." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. I never thought anyone would want to." His heart ached for her, but he didn't show it. Instead, he reached out, taking her hand gently in his. "You're not alone anymore." The room was quiet again, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. The bond between them had grown stronger, not because of words, but because of trust. And in that moment, he knew they would face whatever came next together. The final showdown had come. The alien ship was waiting in the skies above, ready to depart, but not without taking the most important piece of their mission, her. The human stood in the shadow of the massive craft, looking up at the alien woman who had already made her decision. Her eyes were filled with something he couldn't fully understand. It was a mix of fear, confusion, and an odd sense of relief. She had spent so much time on the run, hiding from her people, hiding from the truth. Now, the truth was here, and the consequences were inevitable. "You need to go," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He shook his head. "I'm not leaving without you. You've made it clear that you're not just some alien to me. You're someone who matters." The alien's posture stiffened. She turned slightly away, her back to him, as if the words pained her. But despite her hesitation, he could sense that she was no longer just the mysterious figure she had once been to him. She was real. She was scared, yes, but she was also strong, stronger than anyone he had ever met. "They'll come for you," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "You don't understand what you're risking." He took a step forward. "I don't care about the risk anymore. You're not alone. You don't have to face them on your own." For the first time since their paths had crossed, a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to melt some of the tension in the air. Still, she didn't move closer. "You have no idea what they'll do if they find out I'm with you," she continued. "Your world, they don't understand us, and they will never accept me." He reached out, placing a hand gently on her arm. "I'm not asking them to accept you. I'm asking you to let me be there. Whatever happens next, we face it together." Her eyes softened, but there was still doubt in them. She glanced back at the looming ship, the ship that would take her away from everything, including him. He could see the conflict inside her, torn between a past she couldn't escape and a future she couldn't predict. But the one thing he knew for certain was that she needed to make the choice herself. The human stepped back, his heart pounding. But there was no force, no pressure, just an unspoken promise in his eyes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she sighed. Slowly, she nodded. "I'll stay," she whispered. "But we need to be ready. They won't let us go easily." Together, they turned toward the horizon. The alien ship still hovered, but there was no longer fear in their hearts, only the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. And that, he thought, was enough. The next morning, the human couldn't stop thinking about the alien woman and her sudden declaration. The night before, she had left him with more questions than answers. What did she mean by that? He wondered, sitting by the window with his cup of coffee. He had never imagined his life would take such an unexpected turn, but here he was, struggling to understand a reality beyond his own. He had heard stories of strange beings, of alien worlds, but nothing could prepare him for what he had witnessed. The alien woman, with her mysterious ways and intense gaze, was unlike anything he had ever known. Her presence in his life felt like a puzzle that was slowly unfolding, piece by piece. Yet, every answer she gave only led to more confusion. As he thought about her words, he remembered her eyes, how they had glimmered with both warning and something deeper, something that hinted at a hidden truth. "If they find me, you'll be their next target, human." Her voice echoed in his mind, and he could feel the weight of her warning pressing down on him. But what did it mean? Who was she running from? And why was she so certain that he was in danger too? Just then, there was a soft knock at the door. The human's heart raced. He knew it had to be her. He stood up quickly, opening the door with a cautious hand. There she was, standing in the doorway, her eyes scanning him as if trying to read his thoughts. "You're still thinking about what I said," she remarked, her voice calm, but there was a certain urgency in her words. The human nodded, unsure of what to say. He had so many questions, but he didn't know where to start. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you running from? What's going to happen to me?" She took a deep breath, stepping inside. "I've been hunted, human. Hunted by those who will stop at nothing to get what they want. And now, you're in their sights too." Her words struck him like a bolt of lightning. He had heard of battles between alien races, but he had never thought it would come to his doorstep. The alien woman moved closer, her face softening. "You don't understand what you're about to get into, but I will do everything in my power to keep you safe, if it's the last thing I do." The human could see the determination in her eyes. He realized then that this wasn't just about survival. It was about trust, and maybe something more. But even with that trust, the danger was real. It was only a matter of time before the enemies she feared would come for them both. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the alien landscape. The soft wind rustled through the trees, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers. It felt like the perfect end to what had been an unforgettable day. As the day turned to night, the two sat together, watching the stars begin to twinkle above them. "I never thought I would find myself here," the human said quietly, his eyes lost in the vastness of the sky. The alien woman beside him turned her head, her alien features softened by the warm light. "Why? Is it so strange to be here with me?" Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of vulnerability in it. He glanced at her, surprised by her question. "No, not strange," he said. "Just unexpected. I never imagined something like this happening. I thought I was alone in this world, but now I see there's so much more." The alien woman smiled softly, her eyes glinting with emotion. "Sometimes humans forget how vast the universe is. You think you're alone, but then something changes, and you find someone who makes the world feel a little smaller." They sat in silence for a while, their hearts both heavy with unspoken words. The human wasn't sure what the future would hold, but one thing was certain. His life had taken an unexpected turn. Meeting her had changed everything. "You've made me see things differently," he said, breaking the silence. "I was always focused on survival, on the struggle. But with you, it's different. It's like I can finally see the bigger picture." The alien woman nodded slowly. "I think that's what makes us unique. We learn, we grow, we adapt. But it's not always easy. Sometimes you need a push, a change in perspective." He looked at her and nodded. "I used to think I understood everything, but now I realize there's so much more to discover. Not just about the universe, but about myself." She reached out and gently took his hand, her fingers cool against his warm skin. "And now you're not alone in this journey," she said softly. "We'll face it together." The human smiled, squeezing her hand. There was a sense of peace in that moment, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The world was still vast, still filled with unknowns. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what came next. With her by his side, anything felt possible. As the stars twinkled above them, the two of them sat in quiet companionship. They didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, it didn't matter. They were together, and that was enough. And as the night deepened, the human realized something. Sometimes, the best things in life come when you least expect them.